It seems the news of Legion's Imperialis's demise has been much exaggerated. And as much as it seems that some quarters of the internet would like to see the game die an immediate and permanent death, we are still here and still persevering. And Games Workshop seems to have proven that quite decisively with the previews from a couple of weeks ago. And so in this video, we're going to talk about each of the previews and what they mean for the future of the game, what I think about them individually, and where Legions Imperialis may go from here. So let's start by looking at the Saturnine battle group. And I will say, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of the Saturnine look, the Saturnine models. For me, they just represent something that's just a little bit too over the top, which I suppose is saying something for Warhammer, but it's just a little too over the top. And I also don't care for it because it represents something that, to my mind, is a bit of a lazy design trope in the sense that we're just taking something, Terminators and Dreadnoughts, and we're just making them better somehow. And I just don't care for that attitude. Um, but that said, if these are your bag, if you like these, then here they are, and they're certainly going to do quite a bit, I think, to mix up Astartes army lists. So the battle group itself contains several stands, looks like 12 stands of Saturnine Terminators, 4 command stands, 8 Saturnine Dreadnoughts, and 2 Fire Raptor gunships, 8 of the new weapon platforms, 2 Mastodons, and 8 Vindicators. I'm not quite sure how I feel about the unit mix here. I think the number of infantry that you get through the Dreadnoughts and the Terminators are pretty good. I think the Saturnine Dreadnoughts are probably going to have a positive effect on the durability of Astartes armies, especially in the face of the new 2 wound Ogrins and the Automata from the Mechanicum. I think that you're going to be able to put some of these in a Mastodon and run them up the table, and they're going to be able to do a lot of damage very quickly. The Vindicators, I'm still not convinced by. I think they're pretty expensive for what you get, and I'm just not sure what their utility is on the table. I talked in a previous video about how I didn't think that Demolisher was a particularly beneficial weapon type to have in your army. I may be proven wrong, but I think purchasing a vehicle that is solely dedicated to a very short range, although admittedly high damage weapon, is probably not where the Astartes need to be focusing their energies. The Arachne weapon platforms, I'll talk a bit more about in a bit. But overall, I'd say that while the Vindicators are not necessarily the weapon or the vehicle that I would have chosen, I think this is going to be a good starter box. You're going to get some air cover. You've got some weapon platforms to kind of shield your flanks. And then you have a bunch of heavy and durable units that you're going to be able to punch up the middle and really seize some objectives. So let's talk about the Terminators individually. This is all speculation here, but I'm guessing that these are going to be 2 wound, 4 up armored Terminators, and I think that they're going to have a 5 up invulnerable save, because that's really the only way I can see them being better than regular Terminators, other than maybe just having Rend or maybe having a better weapon available to them. It looks like they have the disintegrator cannons, they have plasma cannons, so they're probably going to have at least light AT weapons available to them, if not even heavier, which will make them even more dangerous. And if they can deep strike, we're talking some serious versatility as either a reserve force or an ability to drop down into your enemy's deployment zone and really alter the course of the engagement. The command stand is just, I'm sure, going to be very tough in close combat, and is going to have the same traits as the regular guys, except it's going to be obviously focused towards melee. The one concern that I have here is that if they are 2 wounds, they do have a 4 up armored save and a 5-up invulnerable save that just basically makes them a dreadnought. So I'm not sure where the design space exists for these, but we'll just have to wait and see when the actual statistics come out. The dreadnoughts themselves, I'm guessing, will probably have 2 wounds, again, to differentiate them from the regular dreadnoughts that we're used to for the Astartes. Probably with a 4-up regular save, armored, of course, and then a 4-up invulnerable save. With their weapon loadout, I would be very surprised if the variant on the right doesn't have some kind of wrecker weapon so that it can destroy buildings and structures. Whereas the others, it looks like it has a heavy disintegrator cannon or something like that, and then a plasma cannon. I don't know the names, the new names of the Saturnine weapons, so you have to forgive me. But I looked in my rulebook. I didn't see a disintegrate keyword or a special rule for weapons, so that may be something that we'll get when these are released. So I'm interested to see how that mechanic will play out on the table. I do think it's interesting that these don't have a dedicated melee weapon. Perhaps the variant on the right, one of those weapons will serve as a melee weapon, even though I think it looks more like a ranged weapon of some kind. So these will be interesting to see when the stats come out, and yeah, I think they'll definitely have a huge effect on how people build their Astartes armies. As far as the weapon platforms, it looks like there are 3 variants in total. We have an anti-air, anti-infantry with something that looks like a Punisher cannon from the Sakaran Punisher, and then also a light AT autocannon, probably. Although it does look very similar, except with 4 barrels to the Sakaran autocannon. So perhaps it has no keyword, and that might be quite interesting. That would be a very versatile and dangerous weapon. So we'll just have to wait and see. I don't particularly care for these personally from an aesthetic point of view, for the same reasons I described as the in the Saturnine battle group, just because these are tarantulas but better. I personally don't care for them. But as again, if you do like them, obviously these are going to be an excellent addition to your force, and I think a good way to secure your flanks with a pretty cheap option while you have the more expensive Saturnine dreadnoughts and Terminators really going after the enemy objectives. So up to this point, I was a little bit disappointed with the releases. I mean, I was sort of expecting Saturnine, um, but obviously, as I have described, it wasn't really something I was particularly looking forward to. But, and I thought that was all that was going to be revealed. However, I was wrong, and Games Workshop has revealed that we've got not one, but 2 sets of variants for the Fellblade. We have the Fellblade and the Glaive pictured here, and it looks like we have options to outfit their quad sponsons with either las cannons or laser destroyers. I really like the look of these models. I've always loved the Fellblade. I think the Forge World model, it's a little bit different. I think somehow there's something about it that I personally prefer, but these are still excellent looking models, and they're probably going to finally get me to make a full Astartes army. And so as far as the weapons themselves go, we've got the main cannon, the standard Fellblade variant, which is finally, I hope, going to give the Astartes a solid, long-ranged, armored weapon that they can use to really contest with the Solar Auxilia armor, which has been so dominant for basically the entire lifetime of the game so far. As with the Baneblade, I do think that the mix of weapons between the heavy bolters, the demolisher cannon in the front, the long main gun, the las cannon sponsons or the laser destroyer sponsons, it kind of lets it down because you want to be far away, excuse me, to take advantage of the range of your gun, but by doing so, you're also losing that demolisher cannon, and you may also be losing the las cannon, and you're certainly going to lose those laser destroyers. So the mixed loadout, I think, is a weakness of this chassis, just like it is for the Baneblade. However, I think it is a capability that the Astartes really, really need, and so I'm excited to see them in armies going forward. The Volkite Carronade that's on the Glaive variant, I really don't know if that's going to be worth it to take. I think Volkite is, especially the heavier variants, does not seem to me to be worth the price simply because it just doesn't do the damage that it needs to. And when you have heavy armor, it seems like you really want that heavy armor to be able to take out other heavy armor and not to be focusing on infantry or light armor or dreadnoughts or automata. Um, Maybe if you're facing off against a lot of titans and you want some of this shield bane weaponry to help you take those down, I could possibly see that. But I think there are much easier ways to strip void shields than dedicating an entire Fellblade chassis vehicle to doing that. So, of course, until we see the actual stats for the Volkite Carronade, we won't know for sure, and we'll just have to wait and see. This was a big surprise to me. I knew the Falchion was coming. I think the Falchion is another very cool variant. It's got a twin-linked volcano cannon from the looks of it, which is wild. And so that's going to be another great addition to the Astartes. I mean, having that capability even more, even beyond the Fellblade, the long range accelerator cannon that the Fellblade has, this volcano cannon is going to be a real boost to Astartes armies. And I think it looks like a great model, and I'm excited to get one for myself or two and paint them up. The Ascalon, which is a brand new variant, brand new to both Legions Imperialis and the Horus Heresy, and it looks like it has a Warhound flame gun on it. And again, I'll say the same thing that I did for the Glaive in the last slide. I'm just not sure that you want to dedicate a heavy tank chassis and spend the points on it to kill a bunch of infantry. I do like the fact that they're adding a new template weapon into the game. I think we don't have enough template weapons as it is. We need more. Um, but I just don't know if the points are going to be worth the capability. I think there's many better ways to kick infantry out of buildings. Um, so we'll just have to see. I think it's pretty clear that we're going to be seeing more Baneblade chassis variants. This is a sort of a side tangent because obviously this doesn't deal with the Astartes, but we're getting a brand new Astartes variant for the Fellblade. And so I would be pretty surprised if we don't see some more of the standard Baneblade chassis, like the ones with the Vulcan Megabolter. And so, I mean, there's so many Baneblade variants, right? The one with the Quake Cannon, all these that we haven't seen. It just leads me to believe that Games Workshop is going to be releasing these. And if nothing else than a perhaps cynical reason, it's just more stuff for them to release. It's more vehicles in the catalog. So this I was very excited about. The next thing that they released were the combined arms groups. And these I have mixed feelings about. I think it's great that they're continuing to put out boxes for Legions Imperialis so new players can really get a good head start in the faction that they are interested in playing. Because as we all know, the starter set is nice in the sense that it gives you dice and rulers and a rule book, a hardcover rule book, which is not nothing. But you do have two sides of you got the Solar Auxilia and the Legion's Astartes, and you can't really make a full army with what you get in the starter box. With these combined arms battle groups, it looks like Games Workshop is trying to remedy that. So let's look at the contents. You get a very small amount of infantry. It looks like maybe one infantry box at most. You do get a lot of dreadnoughts, though. You get 4 of each of the Deradeo, the Leviathan, and the Contemptors. So that's good. I mean, we all know dreadnoughts are probably the best unit in the Astartes list. They're very effective. I think they're pretty points efficient. And especially now that they've gotten a little bit of a boost in the Liber Strategia, there are some of the weapon options that are a bit more competitive. So that was good to see. You also get a few tarantulas and some rapiers. Again, the only problem I see here is that there's really not enough of anything. I mean, you get plenty of dreadnoughts. The rapiers, you probably are going to need at least 4 more to make a decent detachment. Um, I do like to see the Sakaran Arcus in here. You get 4 of those. I think that's probably the best variant of the Arcus. Um, I don't play Astartes regularly, and I certainly haven't played with this Karn in a while, so I can't speak too much to its effectiveness, but it does seem like one of the better variants available to the Astartes list. You also get some Land Raiders, which is great, and 4 Kratos tanks, so that's a solid armored core for your army. The only thing that I'm not happy about, although I do think you could have some more infantry, maybe double the amount of infantry to really get people started on the right foot, is the number of fighters, of aircraft in this box. There is no way that you're going to need 6 of these Xiphon fighters. Now, maybe you like the aircraft, you want to run them. Personally, I find that in general, aircraft are pretty costly, and you're certainly not going to need 6 of them or want to take 6 of them in one army, especially as a beginner. So I don't know quite why you need to have 6 in a box. It seems like Games Workshop could have maybe thrown in a bit more infantry and skimped out on 3 of the Xiphons. So you'd still have enough to paint up in a couple of different color schemes if you want to do different legions or have a small pair that are providing air cover for you. But that's a fairly small complaint. You can always resell them, I suppose, on eBay. I think this box does give you a pretty solid core for your force, and it's a good place to start, I think. We also have a combined arms battle group for the Solar Auxilia, and this one I am less impressed with. You get a fair number of infantry. You get some Velatari, some Flamers. Looks like, again, maybe 1 box worth. And then you get a bunch of rapiers, some Cyclops, and a bunch of Tarantulas. And personally, I've never found the Cyclops to be really worth the points. I should probably try to play with them maybe a few more times, but they just don't really seem to do much on the table. The rapiers, you get a lot. I mean, you're getting 12 in this one box. So that is, that's enough to field a decent detachment. But you're also getting 12 tarantulas. So in the Solar Auxilia force, you're not really getting a lot of armor, which is really their strength. You're not getting a lot of infantry, which needs to have the numbers in order to have any kind of staying power on the Legions Imperialis table. You get some Dracosans, which is good for transporting your Ogrins, I suppose, and your Velatari. But 6, I don't know if I really see that for this battle group. You get 2 of the Shadow Swords, which is good. And then you get 8 Demolisher Leman Russes, it looks like. So again, as I said with the Vindicator, the Demolisher Leman Russ is just, I mean, yes, if you get close enough, it's going to do some damage and make your opponent think twice. But it has to get close enough. And even with that 2-up save, they only have a single wound. And I think you're spending a lot of points for something that's not going to be particularly effective on the tabletop when its purpose is really to get up and destroy buildings. And if you're not destroying buildings that much, which you probably shouldn't be, then I'm not sure these are really what you want in your force. But with all that said, this is going to give you still a decent core force for your Solar Auxilia army. And I've already talked about the aircraft, so I won't belabor the point. It's slightly better here because Solar Auxilia they have better aircraft than the Astartes do. So the Lightning Fighter is certainly not a slouch, and having more of them in your army is not necessarily a bad thing. I still think it's too many for a beginner box, but it gives you some to try different schemes and maybe try an aircraft heavy force. Now we come to the exciting bit, the Journal Strategia. And so this represents a paradigm shift for Legions Imperialis, right? So up to this point, up to the Liber Strategia, we have been receiving I think it was roughly quarterly campaign books. We had the Devastation of Talorn, the Great Slaughter, the Dark Mechanicum book, and all of these were hardcover books containing new units, new formations, campaign options, usually a pretty significant lore section detailing the campaign that the guide or the book focused on. And I'm a fan of that model in the sense that that model means to me that Legions Imperialis is not going to get regular design editions. Instead, we're going to have regular supplements like a lot of the specialist games do, at least from my understanding, like Necromunda, like Adeptus Titanicus did. And for me, I think Legions Imperialis does not need a new edition, and I think that most of the people who do play Legions Imperialis would rather it just did not have it. Now, of course, that means Games Workshop still has to have something to sell, right? And so they have to put out these regular supplements to produce new models, introduce new rules, and to have something for us to buy. So that looks to be going away. In the specific sense, the general tone of their model for Legions Imperialis seems to be staying the same. So they're going to be producing these journal strategia, which looks like they're soft cover, and it seems to me that they're going to be in a similar vein in the sense that they're going to cover perhaps smaller engagements, smaller battles. So in this case, we're focusing on only the Salamander sector of the Dropsite Massacre at Istvan. And so perhaps we will see more of these journals in more rapid succession, focusing on Iron Hands and Raven Guard, and that those will come with more of a focus perhaps on the lore and not so much necessarily on things like campaigns and new units and new formations. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good or bad thing. I don't know how many people actually use the campaign systems in the book. They are nice to have. I don't think I've ever used any of them. So I wonder if Games Workshop is going to spend more of their design time focusing on the units and formations and the lore, which I personally would like. I did think that the Dark Mechanicum book was a bit disappointing. The narrative was okay, but it didn't really have any nice maps or any operational graphics, which, as you can imagine, that's a big appeal for me. So not having that in the Dark Mechanicum book was a disappointment. And I'm hoping that this new journal Strategia will have lots of maps, lots of color plates that I think is what people like about the Horus Heresy. I mean, people have always sort of accused the Horus Heresy, either rightly or wrongly, as being almost historical wargaming for Warhammer 40,000 enthusiasts. And I think that's very true because it's always had a more grounded tone. Like if you look back at the original Forge World paint schemes, like the colors are much more muted than 40K. There's a lot of weathering, a lot of traditional armor scale modeling techniques that got applied to their vehicles and of course even their Astartes armor. And so I think that tone also carries over to the idea of replicating something that happened and fighting famous battles and learning about different engagements and different tactics and techniques and procedures that were used during the Horus Heresy. And whether you like that or not, whether you think that's silly or not, I think that's certainly a part of the Horus Heresy legacy. And it's something personally that appeals to me. And so I hope that these journal strategia will lean into that and we will really have something that gets people excited about playing different engagements, playing different special units even from the Horus Heresy. Like for instance, right now I'm painting up a the Talorn Carmine ambush tercio, and that was something that was really interesting to me. The color scheme I liked, the idea of something distinctive and different that had a history and a story behind it, I really liked. And the color plates have always been so good in the Forge World books, and I really hope that we'll see more of those in these books to come. So this was probably the highlight of the previews for me, maybe the Fellblades. But between the Fellblades and this, I'm pretty happy. Moving on, I want to focus a little bit on our brother system, the Horus Heresy, and they recently revealed, or they revealed at the same time, a Skitarii battle group. Now, these are very different from the original Skitarii by Forge World. These have like extended legs, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it does make them very distinctive and different from normal infantry, which is maybe what they were going for. And so these coming out in plastic for the Horse Heresy, I think basically confirms that we're going to see these for our scale for the Mechanicum. And to me, that means that the Mechanicum is going to be able to field a much more conventional infantry based force if that's your thing, and may be able to pull itself away a little bit from the automata heavy forces that we've seen and focus more on, as I said, a conventional force based around combined arms, movement of armor, and infantry in tandem to seize and hold objectives. I'm not a huge fan of the Skitarii models themselves personally. Again, I think they're just a bit too outlandish. But at the same time, we're talking about the Mechanicum, so outlandish is perhaps here justified, if nowhere else. The last thing I want to talk about, and this really surprised me, this is not even a Horus Heresy related thing, was the 500 Worlds campaign and models. And I was actually really excited by this. I haven't really paid attention to Warhammer 40K in a long time. I mean, other than tangentially. And nothing that Games Workshop has done since basically since I was, I don't know, since they got rid of the original Space Marines, I suppose, has really interested me or excited me about the setting. But I think this is a great idea. The idea of a Space Marine captain being given a fixed goal, and in this case, of course, to reconquer and reestablish the 500 worlds of Ultramar. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's a real classic idea for wargaming and particularly role playing games, actually. There's the Pathfinder Kingmaker module, there's the Keep on the Borderlands, there's so much stuff that's focused around a character and his advisors and fellow player characters, I suppose, being given a mission to go out into the wilderness, essentially, and to bring civilization to it and to fight against, in this case, it's Necrons. But of course, in whatever setting it is, it's sort of all the same, right? It's the nebulous forces beyond the borders, and it has a lot of scope for personal initiative. You have a lot of scope for interesting characters. I really like the idea of these characters having human counterparts or human advisors, like you have a telepath or an astropath, excuse me. You have a naval officer, an officer of the Ultramarines. I forget what they're called, but the Auxilia, essentially, and their sort of human ground forces. And so having those interactions can, I think, really bring some life to the Space Marines, which I think are often characterized too much as these sort of robotic, non-feeling entities. And that's really not what they are and not what they should be. And so seeing this, I really like the look of the miniatures. I like the idea. I like that there's a clear goal, right? You've been given a mission. You have 100 Space Marines. You have vehicles. You have a small fleet. Go out and conquer and restore this part of the Imperium. And I think this is a great way to do it. There's a lot of room for political and military maneuvering. I'm sure there's some worlds that are not conquered by chaos or aliens or Xenos or anything like that, or they haven't fallen to any kind of heresy, but they are perhaps not particularly interested or reluctant to rejoin with the Imperium as a whole. So this gives lots of room for the characters to have political as well as military maneuvers. I've never really liked how the Necrons have been turned into these sort of pseudo Egyptian dynasties in more modern 40k. Even though there were hints of that, I suppose, back when they originated in, I don't even remember, third edition or something like that. And so, but that's really not outweighing any of the other great stuff that's here. So there's like I've been saying, there's a lot of really interesting ideas, not necessarily original ideas, but I think they are an interesting addition to Warhammer. And this may be something that you might be interested in, even if, like me, Warhammer 40k has not been something that you're super you're keeping tabs on in recent years. But even if you're not, I think this could be an interesting idea to apply to the Horus Heresy. I mean, certainly this is something that could be, this concept could be applied to the Horus Heresy. And maybe this is something that maybe we could do something like that for the channel. I don't know. Maybe involving the channel members, or maybe just viewers in general, and have some kind of large scale campaign similar to this. Um, So I don't know if that's something that's would interest you. I guess leave a comment and let me know. And if enough people are interested, perhaps I'll give it some more thought, and maybe put some effort into coming up with something solid for us to do. I think that would be pretty fun. So in closing, I was initially pretty let down. I mean, I was very glad to see that Games Workshop was, still releasing things for Legions Imperialis, right? I'm always happy to see that. But I did think that the Saturnine stuff was something I was expecting, but not particularly excited by. The combined arms groups, I think, are good for beginners. Just good to see that people have more options to get into the game. But for a player who has a lot of that stuff already, not particularly exciting. That said, the Fellblade and the Journal Strategia really brought it up out of the low tier for me, just so to speak. I think the Fellblades are great models. I think they are going to be very good for Legion Astartes armies. I think the Journal Strategia is, although I am disappointed in some sense that it's going to be soft cover and not a hard cover, I hope that they will be released more often, that they will have a more operational and lore focus than the campaign books previously. We'll see more color plates, more things to get people excited about the hobby side, and maybe the more military historical aspect of the Horus Heresy. And just to continue that with new releases, new models, I think the fact that we've seen Scutari for the Horus Heresy is also exciting. We're going to see some of those for the Mechanicum coming very soon, and we'll see a new playstyle for the Mechanicum when those arrive. So I think that's about it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe and do all of that YouTube stuff. And I guess I'll see you in the next video.